Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
There are all sorts of things that happen, Sam said, squinting at his companion with embarrassment. Kate was 8 years younger than him. Barely 18 was this red-headed doll who must be out of her petite nether regions. She barely reached the top of his shoulder. She also reminded him of Kate because of her playful directness. Kate had been working as a waitress at Caesars for 3 months now. She'd gotten the job in a very unusual way. She just came in and said she wanted to work there. Although, by the way, in the ad clearly said that you need a person with experience, ready for intensive loads. Running around on your feet all day with heavy trays, that's no joke. The interview was conducted by the owner herself, Vanessa, and everyone was actually shocked that she hired the new girl. She wouldn't last a week, Molly said. A dishwasher who worked part-time at Caesars because her pension wasn't enough to live on. She's embarrassing us, she rolled her eyes. Emily is a waitress with the figure and face of a model. I love every spare moment I have on my smartphone. Where she watched Turkish soap operas. Emily was very professional. She was tipped all the time. But sympathizing with the girl was hindered by her arrogance. She turned her nose up, saying that she was waiting for her Prince Charming and that he must be a millionaire. Such words were like a knife to Sam's heart, because he was in love with Emily a little bit. With a high level of unrequited love, and did not want Sam to notice at all the signs of attention that Kate was giving him. He perceived her no more than a little sister. Yeah, I guess that's what it was. Sam had always wished he had a little sister, or a family at all. He was an orphan. Once a long time ago, just a kid, he swore to himself that he would never repeat the path of his parents, who drank themselves to death. And when he got out, the freedom and will of adult life did not turn his head at all, no. The guy graduated from culinary school, managed to work on the pizza and sushi exchanges. Then he cooked for the culinary department of a large supermarket, and then taking the prize of audience sympathy. At the competition met with her, which at this competition took first place. And so by a happy accident, Sam began to work at Caesars, quickly working his way up from ordinary cook to chef and finally chef. Sam believed he was perhaps as compensation from the universe. For the bitter orphan childhood, he now lived a happy life. Everything was going well for him. If only there was still love in his life, but so far there was no love. He could devote himself entirely to professional affairs. And now Sam was proud that Benjamin, the owner of the place, had decided to take part in a new cooking competition. It was going to be a huge event. It was to be covered by both local and foreign press. And its uniqueness lay in the fact that it was to bring together the best catering establishments in the city. And the competition was not in something trivial, but in dessert. Sam believed. On such a space, his bosses will go wild and will definitely win. And this victory, of course, will strengthen Caesars' position in the catering industry. After all, the competitors are not slumbering. Only in the last 6 months on the same street opened 2 establishments. In general, it was necessary to move in order not to go bankrupt. And the more offensive was Sam, when he learned that she, it turns out, considers the idea of the competition is a complete nonsense, and even scolded her husband for this. What does Caesars have to do with an institution with average and even modest cynic, where they serve unpretentious dishes, and a contest for professional pastry chefs, for elite class establishments? What we're going to impress everyone with in a high-pitched tone. So everyone heard. Did Vanessa Zatia with apple pie or girlfriends, or maybe with seasonal berries? We're just gonna get laughed at. Sam, aren't you listening to me? He was pulled out of his musings. Katya's offended tone and a palpable nudge of her small elbow in the ribs. Excuse me. Pensive. Sam coughed. Nervously, the rain began to fall, and he opened his umbrella over them. Kate was a terrible stretch, and despite the wet weather forecast, the umbrella was not with him. I asked, seriously repeated Kate, and her voice trembled strangely. Maybe we can go somewhere this weekend to the movies. Can there be a new movie like this movie? And let's absent-mindedly answered Sam. About what a movie about love with a huff, replied Kate, and so shot his blue eyes at him. Thinking that Sam understood, and he got caught. Trapped himself, but he blanched. He couldn't just say, like a fool, that he'd remembered something important for the weekend. He called himself a dick. And then, as they say, Sam sighed well. What movie theater are we going to? After all, he thought, it's only a movie, not a date. So he will not owe anything to the picture. But from now on, he'd have to keep his ear to the ground with this duck. Looks like it's not such a kitten. Kate never worked a day in her young life before coming to Caesars. Why would she? If her mom provides everything she wants, if she's spoiled like a princess. But there was a downside to that. Rigid, strict control. The only thing she needed to complete the picture was a flood collar. Kate grew up without a father. No, there was one, of course, but he wasn't talked about in their family. Her mom used to tell the little girl when she asked if he was dead. But then, when she was 14, she learned the truth. Her mother had given birth to her from a donor, flown overseas, and there in the clinic everything happened. Simply because Nancy wanted a child so badly. But she didn't want to get married and have relationships with men. That she strictly forbade herself, and Kate realized very early on why. It was because Nancy had a big problem with her appearance. Her face from her left temple to her chin was crisscrossed with bumps and crooked scars on her neck and shoulders, as if red reformed flowers were blooming. The doctors said that for some reason, perhaps due to a hormonal disruption, the body was unable to fully repair the areas damaged in the accident. The skin was formed with thick pigment flecks. For this reason, Nancy never wore anything revealing. And if she had to leave the house, she stood in front of the mirror for long periods of time applying makeup. But it didn't hide the scars of her uneven face. Already at the age of 10, Kate knew grandparents in general native moms. They spent a lot to make her beautiful again. But the peculiarities of the body, its reaction to Lisa, they did not allow Nancy to fully visit plastic surgeons. After all, to somehow improve her appearance required surgery. And so at the family council, they decided that health was more important. And Nancy herself began to treat her peculiarities already philosophically. However, when Kate was little, she was still very offended that other children had fathers and she did not. "Mommy, you are my most beautiful," often said a simple-minded girl. "You should all love you? Let's find me a daddy. And you a husband." Sometimes Nancy would laugh at this. But more often she got very angry and told me not to talk nonsense. Later, in adolescence, when Kate was already beginning to realize herself as a person, she realized the whole nightmare her mother was living in. So, in principle, Kate allowed for the idea that even with physical disabilities, it was possible to love a person. But she also realized that the likelihood that her mother would meet such a spiritually rich man, for whom appearance is not the main thing, is extremely small. As for the mother-daughter relationship in general, it was good, but complicated. The fact was that Nancy firmly knew what was good for her daughter, and Kate thought it was completely stubborn teenage stubbornness that she knew better. The final straw that created the storm was her mother's words, which sounded like an order. That after school, Kate would go to a university of economics and become a manager. "I wanted to go to Africa to study animals." Kate objected, as if she were a child. "Mom, I'm not going to make a good manager. I'll die of boredom." "That's what, daughter?" Nancy said sternly, "As long as you live in my house and on my money, I'll decide what you do." And clearly, Nancy was used to commanding because she herself had worked in the personnel department of a large enterprise all her life and kept subordinates from small to large, not counting her direct superiors. That's what they call in a tight grip. But since Kate's character clearly went to the mother, and maybe in the mysterious father of the donor, the easy victory Nancy did not win, and the daughter simply hid her papers. So in the room she hid that her mother and grandparents could not find. Here announced Kotenko, folding her arms across her chest, and looking Volchok, "I will not go to your university. No way, I'll go next year, wherever I decide. In the meantime, I'll live on my own money and pay for the utilities." Nancy only twisted her head and the next day blocked the card with which her daughter used to spend money. The grandmother said everyone wanted to give her a heart attack, and another day later gave her granddaughter one of her cards. "I won't let my gold starve." Winked at Granny too. Grandpa kept neutral for a week and then said that love for animals is a sign of a good person, but not obedience to the will of parents. It's a sign of a rotten soul. So you have to look at it. What you're gonna make of yourself, he said. But if you don't fool around and seriously stick to your goal, I'll support you. And with such peripecias, a fake kitten found herself in the place of a waitress at Caesar's. The job, by the way, was harder than she imagined. But Kate, though Mykola, in the evenings was not going to quit. You repeated, Vanessa, enchanted, and was horrified, looking at the one she thought had disappeared from her life forever. Hi, said Nancy. It's been a while. She grinned. Do you want coffee? What? But how could you? Raised her voice to Vanessa. She was putting her finger on her husband. What a bastard. And I'm with her. So you were in love with her then. So you've had it between you for a long time. How long has it been between us that you're dumbfounded? Asked Benjamin. There must have been something in Vanessa's tone, because the small fairy tale company began to look around the cafe. My husband has a mistress. Muffled from Vanessa's lips. But why? She grimaced in disgust. Although it seemed obvious, a pang of disbelief glanced at the couple in front of her. Favorite. Benjamin, rising, took a step towards Vanessa. There is nothing between us. Vanessa's lips trembled at the traitorous tentacles in her nose. You expect me to believe you. Hang in there, man. An inebriated voice came from a neighboring table. Behind him, some guy was sitting with a girl in a short dress. Until the last one. Then they might believe it. Beja, are you crazy? His companion risked pulling his arm. Stop it, I'm ashamed of you. And you lied to me yourself, eh? Vanessa didn't care that their conflict seemed to have worked like the first fallen domino knuckle, dragging someone around in a similar showdown. You can trust him, Nancy said. We're just dating. Ah, that's how Vanessa deftly turned away from her husband and slapped his outstretched hand. That's interesting. How so? Does that mean we're friends, and where do friendships take place in the bunkhouse? Should we call security? Whispered one waitress to another. What if they start trashing the place? I don't think they should. Whispered back the other seemingly decent people. Vanessa stood there and barely felt herself in reality. She was torn by contradictory feelings. On the one hand, a burning resentment and a willingness to send their marriage into tatters right now and throw the wedding ring in the traitor's face. On the other, a desperate longing to believe everything, even the outright lies. Let your spouse take you away from here and forget everything like a terrible dream. Vanessa sobs muzzle and often oversees vision behind the fog. Because the tears did rush from her eyes. Vanessa reached as through a layer of absorbent cotton to her the voice of her ex-girlfriend. There's nothing between us. He's telling the truth. And then Vanessa finally burst into hysterical sobs. She flopped down. Would have come out with her heel on the floor. But her husband gently grabbed her by the shoulders and sat her on a chair, brought her a glass of water. The waitress girl handed it to him. But I got a text. Vanessa was rambling. What's going on? Why are you two meeting in secret? Is it true? Is it not true? She asked, shifting her gaze from her ex-girlfriend to her husband and back again. It is, they both answered in unison. What place did you get? Nancy asked. And from whom? I don't know, shrugged Vanessa and took out her smartphone and put it on the table. Here's the message. Nancy and Benjamin leaned over the screen. I don't know that number, Benjamin muttered. This is some kind of evil joke. Nancy, what do you think? Oh, you little brat, Nancy exclaimed. And she struck the table with such force that the tiny vase of late herbarium bouquets, which had fallen to the floor, shattered. I'll pay, guiltily, turned Benjamin to the waiters, who had just been sighing calmly. But after the outburst from Nancy, they tensed up again. There was no way to get away from the dinner grandmother had prepared. And now, finding herself in her room, Kate from the table tone unbuttoned the leg of her jeans. Wistfully, thinking about the fact that she'd swallowed what must have been a week's worth of calories, no less. Good thing at least she was now spared lunch at Nana's, because she was eating lunch at work. That's for family, though. Kate said that she lunches there, and herself tried to limit herself to an offended yogurt or an apple, because she considered herself a half. Yes, weight versus BMI hinted that this was true. It was a magical evening. He and Sam went to the movies and sat in the back rows. He was crunching popcorn, drinking unhealthy soda, and she was looking more at him than at the screen. Kate was in love to the point of butterflies in her stomach and genuinely thought it was real feelings. And the fact that she'd had such a crush before that was the real deal. What kind of romantic infatuation could there be in high school? Just a dalliance? They were boys who were shy. True, it may have been partly so that this grandmother and mother strictly controlled her social circle, not allowing her to hang out with boys who wouldn't be afraid to say at least on the eve of graduation, "I fell in love," but what was what was. Now Kate considered herself a grown-up, practically an accomplished woman, and was ready to literally fight for her happiness. Since Sam was so uncomprehending, to think he hadn't even tried to kiss her for nothing. It turns out that she poured those expensive perfume from the elite brand, which promised, not according to advertising, to drive any man crazy. The next morning, Kate didn't have to go to work, a legitimate day off, and she was going to get some sleep and then go to the zoo. But the morning right after breakfast, when Grandma left to visit a neighbor, they were both into growing orchids and were going to move the plants to winterize. And when Grandpa left for the clinic, he had an appointment with an ophthalmologist. In the morning, Kate's mother suddenly knocked on Kate's room. "Daughter, we need to talk," she said. The overtone was calm, almost affectionate. But Kate had a feeling as if an unknown animal had slid across her back like a clean paw. It was a bad feeling. And then Kate walked into the hall and saw the look on her mother's face. Oh, she knew what was coming. "Daughter, how do you explain this?" asked Nancy and pointed at the smartphone and the texts Vanessa had sent her the day before. Kotia stretched out in a string. She folded her arms across her chest and pressed her lips together. What did she have to say about it? "Because I want to protect you," the girl blurted out, and then, unable to stand the fact that her head was spinning like tornadoes, a field tornado ripping through her head. "Because I can't watch you ruin yourself." "Did you call Benjamin?" asked Sam, standing in the supervisor's office. "I asked for no middle name, but it was Benjamin. Because I feel too solid, you know." "I understand, Benjamin." "Sorry, I won't do it again. Round my eyes, Sam." And all I had to do was grin at him. What a weirdo, huh? He's not a small man, and he's not a teenager, but he acts like a kid, honestly. But actually, Benjamin Sam sympathized. It was weird. But sometimes he caught himself thinking that if he ever had a son, he would want him to be like Sam. Probably just as smart, good-natured, hardworking, talented. Yeah, it's an unfair world. Some bastards, alcoholics, throw their own child at the mercy of fate. And people who dream of children can't give birth to them. I'm talking about the pastry contest. Benjamin, thoughtfully tapping his pen on the table. "I think Vanessa is right. She is a good cook, but not a pastry chef, and has never been good at desserts. Therefore, her candidacy to participate is canceled." I mean, that's what Sam said disappointedly. So Keezer's out. It was such a brilliant chance. "There is a chance," Benjamin grinned. "And Teaser is in. You're just going to the contest." "You what?" "I'm rounding my eyes, Sam." "But Benjamin, I mean, it's impossible." The guy's got his hands up in the air. "Why?" Now Benjamin looked stern. "You have a lot of experience. Not a bad education. There's experience in competitions. But there will be people like that out there," Sam objected. "There's a chef from Adele's restaurant. He's in Michelin restaurants. Used to work in New York and London. And the coffee shop, they also have their own pastry shops all over the city, such people." The guy took a step back, like he was about to be dragged off to the pageant right now. "Benjamin, don't. You're a smart guy," Sam sighed, co-owner Caesar. "And remember, when you first became chef, you suggested introducing tiramisu, glossy cakes, and a chocolate fountain to the menu. We, of course, said no. After all, our profile is the most common home-cooked food, and not something you can't make at home. But we'd have to complicate the kitchen, and the price tag would be high. We have to stay the course. We're like a good canteen in terms of prices and assortment, but like a cafe in terms of service and atmosphere. But now, Sam, this is your chance. And you're a man who's accomplished so much, aren't you? Will you let him in? There was silence in the office for a few minutes. Everyone was thinking about something else. And then Sam looked up, clear-eyed. He had made his decision. Okay, Benjamin, just Benjamin. Okay, I agree, I'll do my best. But if I win, he added with a cheerful smile, we'll discuss again what we can include in our menu. Deal. Deal, Benjamin smiled back at him. Kate didn't realize that her mother was ruining herself right away, and even at first, she was happy about it. And how could she not be happy that her mother, who was already over 40, suddenly decided that she was still a woman who did not want to spend her life without love? Which meant she needed to find a man to be her soulmate. Nancy suddenly decided that her physical imperfections were no reason to give up her personal happiness. Kate was thrilled, but it wasn't that simple. At first, Nancy tried to find a suitable candidate for future husband among her entourage, friends, buddies, and colleagues. There wasn't much choice, but one man reciprocated. His name was Nick, and at first glance, he seemed quite decent. His home does not drink, divorced. But that's just the little things in life. Anything can happen. But then suddenly Nick borrowed money from Nancy. Then he borrowed again. She upgraded his car and bought him a huge plasma TV. Then Nick said he wanted to start his own business, and therefore needed more money. I may be a historian, said Kate's grandfather, but I'm not out of my mind yet to fall for his lies. I mean, it's a common Alfonso. Nancy at first defended her lover, but then, as soon as she canceled Nicholas' financing, he immediately showed his true colors. Nancy naturally cried. But then she decided one failure doesn't solve anything. And after a while, she met a new man. His name was Gosha, worked in the car service, and he earned obviously well, because he was a master of high class. And it seemed that with him you can definitely be behind a stone wall. But suddenly it turned out that he dreams of a child, and only to have a child, and that's it. And then you can do whatever you want, sweetheart. It turned out that Gosha was the founder of his own philosophy, according to which his genes are among the most valuable on planet Earth and should be spread everywhere. In the end, Gosha admitted that he had a dozen kids at least all over the country. He'd also confessed that sometimes he switched his girlfriend's pregnancy prevention pills for ordinary vitamins. Anyway, Nancy broke up with him, a little horrified, and for a couple more months, very disturbed. Because she was just taking the pills and she was afraid. Was she pregnant? Nancy's next man was Martin, a handsome man just under 30, whom they met when, as a cab driver, he drove Nancy and her daughter to the dental clinic. And as with previous beaux, Martin had turned out to be a surprise. He just believed in aliens. He believed that the Earth is secretly ruled by reptiles, and to protect themselves from them, you need to drink infusion, special from herbs and mushrooms, which he himself collected. But that wasn't the end of it. After parting with Martin, other men appeared in Nancy's life. A bandit, an alcoholic, and another type, who decided that when the kitten turned 18, she would also become his mistress. And your mother's all right, winked the immature sleuth. One day, Nancy. After that, by the way, Kate's grandmother drank heart drops for a long time. And grandfather threatened that Nancy should not be married off, but put in a madhouse as a spoil sport. Who? Said Lisa. Kate. Grandma, what kind of spell? Mom just gets the wrong men. If this keeps happening, I don't know how we're going to live. Lisa said, I don't know how we're going to live. A thorough family conversation took place, at which Nancy was persuaded with a chorus, stop trying men if you're not lucky. No love life. Well, that's just fate. What do you want? Father was telling young Nancy off like a fool. We have a place to live. The apartment for Kate is bought. The house will be finished and the young people will have their own corner. 2 cars, savings for a rainy day. You have a profession and a salary that makes me jealous. We fly to Europe every year. We live. We don't know what to do. Is it on the men? That's all right. Don't embarrass me. I'm not risking myself or my daughter anymore. No more dates. It's a deal. And for a while, Nancy went quiet. She seemed to have forgotten all about trying to make a life for herself. But then Kate noticed something was wrong with her mom. She visited a beauty salon, bought a new dress and boots, but most importantly, her eyes were shining in a special way. Then Kate realized Mom was in trouble again, and she decided to stump another nonsense just on the route, just to find out who Mom was messing with again. But there was no need to play detective. Everything was decided by chance. Just one day, Kate was called into the office of the owner of Keezer's to talk about the peculiarities of the working schedule. And it so happened that the door to the office was slightly open, and she heard Benjamin talking on the phone and a few phrases in which slipped special such information about life. The little girl realized that Benjamin was talking to her mom, and she was just shocked. What kind of a nasty coincidence was this? And she also realized that even though Benjamin seemed like a normal man, he was not at all like the others. But her mother is in trouble again because Benjamin is married. Vanessa made a very good impression on Kate, and the girl decided that she had to act, so she sent her a message from her second phone number, which was unknown at work. All her fears and worries accumulated in her heart. Kate spilled out in a stream of emotional speech, overdriven by tears gesticulation, such that almost knocked off the nightstand collection of grandmother's porcelain shepherdess. And finally, Kate fell silent. The girl was breathing hard, as if she'd run 100 meters. "I've said everything," she finished in a colorless voice. Nancy's daughter was shocked by what she heard. Yes, she was well aware of how unsuccessful her attempts to find a man had been. And she had given up all plans for personal happiness. She had learned to get used to a lot of things in her life. First, she had gotten used to the fact that her parents had taken her away from this town to another, away from anything that would remind her of tragedy. But then, after Nancy's grandmother died, they had decided to return to this hometown, because it was once Nancy who had been particularly insistent on leaving. And now with her passing, that commitment was being canceled. "My daughter, my dear," my Nancy stepped toward her, and though Kate tried to dodge, suddenly she hugged her, pulling her to her, took her hair away from her wet face, and gently stroked her cheek. "It's all right, but my silly girl, why didn't you say anything to me? Would you have listened to me?" clapped Kate. "You've been dragging things out with everyone to the last minute, till it got bad, and yet you shook your head. Nancy, we're all you and I'm grandparents. We've talked about everything. I realized that I guess it really wasn't fate. I guess I'm destined to spend the rest of my life alone. But honey, you've got it all wrong, Benjamin. I was really in love with him once," Nancy said thoughtfully, and tears welled up in her own eyes. And then she told Katya for the first time that she had once had feelings for Benjamin. But the silent one was timid and didn't even try to talk to him about it. And how it all ended, told neither he nor she, of course, was to blame for what happened, Nancy said. "It was all my fault. Stupid I was. But now years later, I just wanted to tell him that I had let go of those feelings, that things had changed. We met and decided we were just going to be friends. And as for his wife," Nancy grinned. "I didn't know what Vanessa was like now, did I? I was afraid she wouldn't approve. You know, they say it's impossible for a man and a woman to be friends. But it's not true. Maybe. Benjamin and I used to date. I don't deny it. But as friends, we'd walk around town, reminisce about our high school days. What's wrong with that? And what's in it for you, daughter? And what do I swear to you, my daughter? To make you believe that there was nothing between us." If Kate had any strength left, she would have burst again. Now from the realization of what a stupid thing she'd done, how she'd essentially set her mother up by putting her in such a bad position in front of her ex-girlfriend. "I believe you." Kate nodded. "Mommy, I'm so sorry, please. I didn't mean to." "Yes, I forgive you." Nancy waved her hand. "After all, it would be weird and wonderful if you didn't do something stupid at your age, so we'll just consider it a supplement to your belated teenage rebellion. By the way, there's my life as a job." "All right," Kate smiled through her nose. "It's all good. There's a contest coming up. But it's unlikely we'll win. The competitors are just dragons. And then there's this guy. I like him." She lowered her eyes. "Come on," Mom beckoned her. "Sit down and tell me about it. Let's go to the kitchen. I think Grandma's famous berry pie is still there. We'll talk over tea." That day, Vanessa went to work like a hard labor. The mood was a nightmare. Not only did her parents again read tedious lectures about the fact that she should go to university and not work as a waitress, but the guy she met on the dating site turned out to be not the youngest businessman with a startup worth $1 million, but an ordinary guy who immediately admitted that he put his photo on the shots with expensive cars and resorts in Dubai in order to attract girls. "You know the saying," he said, taking Emily to a cheap diner that served donuts and didn't even have decent coffee, just the simplest of instant packets. "You meet people by their clothes." "I don't know," Emily replied, squeamishly setting aside the greasy donut. "What do you think? Who's gonna go out with you after that?" "Why not?" He shrugged. "I'm a regular, normal guy. I'm not an oligarch. I work in a factory. I live with my mother and grandmother. We have an apartment in a nice neighborhood. There's greenery all around, and in the winter we make snow towns in the yard." "But why do you do it?" Emily asked stubbornly. She was just curious. "Yes," Nick shrugged again. "The girls today are you know what kind of girls, but their demands are high. What to do?" "Well, I figured I'm a normal guy. I want to date someone like you. Beautiful, smart. Don't think I'm gonna spend my life just working in a factory. I mean, I'll be a foreman later on, like my father was." "You're a fool." Emily laughed, and, having risen, has dropped on a plastic table a handful of change. "I can pay for the treats myself." "Yes, wait, you," Nick tried to grab her by the arm, but the girl shuffled aside her nose. "Yeah, but you wouldn't give a normal guy a chance. If I was rich, I'd stay. Is a tight wallet all that matters to you? And she's so beautiful. I thought you had an inner beauty too." "Yeah, but I poked you, Emily, and I got out of your coffee. And so it was time to go to the hated job again." And Vanessa was 20 years old, and she realized that she would be like that without education. She would be a saleswoman or a waitress. But Emily was not going to go to university to lose her young years there, so that then she could sit on low wages for years while others would live beautifully. However, here's Caesar. She was only earning seniority and experience. And then she was going to luxury restaurants to get a job where the crowd is more decent. And she'd definitely be able to pick up a wealthy man, although just last night she had an idea. And what is she waiting for when she already has a wealthy man, that is, the co-owner of Skeezers? Emily had had a good time studying him. He seemed to be a gentleman, which meant one that would be easy to spin. As for his wife, Emily could see perfectly well that Vanessa, despite her substantial income, looked like a shepherdess. Her hair has gray hair, her makeup the most inept. He is her even old man, the figure with age has floated. That is called. If she had that kind of money, Emily would definitely walk like a queen and in the fall would go not on the shuttle bus, but in a private car with a driver and not in a jacket. Simple went from which the figure as a barrel and in a fur coat mink or even lynx. So Emily decided, why not? She is young, beautiful, fresh, and knows how to behave with men. Benjamin, who is accustomed to his spouse a woman's pleasant dish, will definitely not resist. The main organizer of the contest for restaurants and cafes of the city was the restaurant White Swan. Many funds were spent on the preparation. And now the kitchen was ready to receive the participants. Everyone was going to allocate their workplace. The very presentation, dessert from the contestants, as well as their tasting by the jury were to take place in the main and most spacious banquet hall of the restaurant. And of course, the cream of society was invited to this event. Sam was shaking nervously at the mere thought of participating in all this, and he wondered 100 times a day whether it would be better to give it all up. But the boss's promise had already been made, and Sam's name was on the list of competing chefs representing their establishments. So the fact of the matter was that all we had to do was accept it. But that didn't stop me from being nervous. "Benjamin, excuse me, are you busy?" Emily slipped into the office. This day, Keezers was closed to the public for the reason that there were workers working in the hall. Finally, it was decided to replace the light fixtures on the ceiling, as well as update it in general with decorative elements. To Benjamin's taste, however, it was unnecessary. After all, who goes to the cafe in the dining room to admire the ceiling? But since his wife insisted, he didn't mind giving in to her. Workers were hard at work in the hall. Chief Gennady remained in the institution. He'd volunteered to help keep an eye on the place. And Benjamin was getting ready. Today was the day, the pastry contest. He'd been so busy lately, he wasn't glad he'd gotten involved. And now he'd missed the first opening act of the event. Vanessa, who had wanted to go there, certainly together, had been patient with him and nervous. And he could even understand why. Because even though they had talked about everything thoroughly, and she seemed to believe that nothing had happened with Nancy, there was still some tension between them. And now they were almost fighting. In the end, Vanessa said all right, so be it. She would go alone without her husband, even though it was such an important event. She left and told him to hurry up. Actually, I was just leaving, Benjamin said, turning away from the table where he was stacking the business papers he had to deal with tomorrow. Emily, it's not a work day, is it? What do you want? I know about the schedule. We're rearranging it again. It wasn't work that sang out. She came closer, and Benjamin stared at her perplexed. You see, I was going to confess to you. I was going to label you a beauty, who today wore her most seductive mini dress under her jacket, which was more like a sweater in length. And Emily, closely approaching Benjamin, talked about how spectacular, imposing man he is and how his powerful male energy is simply impossible to resist. I'm ready for anything she said in a voice that she thought sounded incredibly seductive, and bit her lip. Just tell me to do it. Emily. Benjamin, who was literally sandwiched between the insolent girl and his desk, a little panicked. He'd never had an adventure like this before. What are you doing? You're old enough to be my daughter. She replied that age is not important, and that she only dreams that an experienced, solid man will guide her and support her financially. So you, Benjamin, couldn't believe your ears. The thing was, he knew Alina's parents a little bit. They were decent people. And he couldn't believe their daughter could behave so ugly. Do you want to be my kept woman? Oh yes, exhaled Emily, rolled her eyes and pitched forward, now actually falling on Benjamin. And it was at that moment that the door to the study fell open and Vanessa walked in. She had come back because she had decided no, she could only go to such an important event with her beloved husband, her hope and support, without whose support Teaser would not exist at all. Vanessa had been thinking a lot in the last few days. She and Benjamin had overcome so much together for so long, and she realized she was ready to believe him after all. And Vanessa was going to tell him all that now. But now she felt like the room had run out of air. Her knees weakened. She was just shocked to see him with that girl. Ah, so that's how you are then? Vanessa exclaimed to the kept woman. Well, that's to be expected, right? Benjamin's favorite Benjamin pushed Emily away from her. It's not what you think it is. Ah, that's how Vanessa squinted her eyes dangerously and swung angrily at him with her purse. Typical male excuse. How are you? It's because she is. She looked at her rival squeamishly, and yet with fear you decided not just to cheat on me. You're tired of having an inferior wife. You decided to have a baby on the side. I hate you. There were tears in her eyes, but Vanessa did not allow herself to develop. That's it. You can do whatever you want. But today is a very important day for Caesar, and you're not going to ruin it for me. Having said that, Vanessa ran out of the office, ran through the hall, almost carrying a stepladder on which one of the workers was standing, and then ran out of the establishment. What a fool you are. With squeamish regret, Benjamin looked at Emily. You're fired. And he rushed after his wife. Emily pressed her lips together. This had not turned out the way she wanted it to. And she hadn't thought about the fact that this guy might even tell her parents. If he thought of such a thing. Emily sighed, cleaned herself up, and looking proudly in front of her, left the office. The girl was cautiously late. She heard a response. And the next moment she had already spun a large bucket of paint, which flooded her new suede boots. And then with chagrin and all, Emily just cried. Sam looked down at his hands and also at the table where the ingredients lay, ready to be transformed into a magnificent dessert. And how scared was he? He was surrounded by professionals, pastry geniuses. What's he doing here anyway? He's a simple kid from an orphanage who doesn't even work in an elite restaurant, but in a cafeteria canteen. Sam thought for a long time about what to surprise the sophisticated public. He went through a lot of complicated dessert recipes, each of which could safely be called a work of confectionery art. But then he suddenly remembered the main condition of the contest was to prepare a dessert that the chef thought was the best. That is, that he personally thought was the best, and such a dessert was on Sam's mind. He tasted it for the first time in an orphanage. There worked one teacher. Her name was Nina, and she was a kind, but unfortunately childless woman who, not knowing the joys of motherhood, decided to devote herself to the care of poor children who were left without family warmth. And sometimes she treated the pupils to what she knew how to cook best: apple pie. Sam, like many orphans, adored candy, chocolate, and all kinds of sweets from the store. But nothing could compare to this pie with apples. And then, when he graduated from the orphanage, he continued to correspond, to call this nice woman. They maintained friendly relations, and he also asked her for the recipe for that apple pie. So he decided now, why not make it after all? The choice of recipe is his decision, and that's the only way the contest rules. And the fact that he's not as exquisitely refined as others, that's not his problem. He'll just make the dessert he thinks is best. But Sam decided to add a little something of his own, yes. Sam kept the same apple pie at the heart of the cloudy charlotte, with apple slices stacked on the bottom of the mold. But he complicated the recipe by adding hazelnuts and a little honey to the apple. And finally, to somehow decorate the dessert, Sam decided not only to sprinkle the finished pie with powdered sugar, but also to serve it with whipped cream. And once again in his mind, repeating all the steps, Sam resolutely set to work. Now his nothingness, even if an angry tiger suddenly appeared in the kitchen, could not distract Mom. "Thank you so much," Kate thanked him again. Nancy had made some useful connections over the years, and it was one of those connections that allowed her to get 2 invitations to this contest. But Nancy wasn't interested in that sort of thing. And she came here, of course, because her daughter wanted her to. She wanted to support the boy she was in love with. And on this occasion, by the way, Nancy decided to waive her own rules about not giving her daughter money, and together with her went to the store where she paid for a very smartly colored holiday dress for the kitten. And now they were among the guests. "Mom, there are such delicious pills," and chocolate-covered strawberries. Kate had one bad domestic habit. She often tried to carry more in her hands than she could carry. She'd gotten caught a couple times at work, when she'd taken an order and instead of going to the kitchen to get it, she'd loaded one tray twice at a time. As a result, it flew to the floor, but after she was reprimanded in front of the whole team and deducted the cost of missing dishes from the salary, Kate did not do so. But now for some reason again did so a girl hurried to her mother with a tray of delicious, and there were glasses of alcoholic fruit, cocktails, and when it was necessary to warm up, Kate failed to perform this maneuver, and as a result the contents under the nose flew on the floor and partially on the costume of this man. "Oops, sorry." Kate was jumping around the injured man, offering paper napkins. Kate's daughter. "How could you not be so neat?" "I apologize for her too." Nancy showed up. "It's not worth the trouble." "Mademoiselle," Madame answered them in a strong foreign accent. A man. He looked to be about 45 years old. Black hair with a noble gray at the temples. A neat beard and mustache. Shrewd gray eyes and strong-willed facial features. He was dressed in a Kremlin and suit with a mottled silk tie, and in tone with it a silk handkerchief in his jacket pocket. And now on the light-colored fabric of the suit, with no glassy stains, blurred traces of the thick sauce based on cream cheese and tomatoes, which earlier had been crabbed in their baskets. "I guess it's not so terrible," the man smiled, rejecting the offer to wash it all immediately. "Really, ladies, I'm not worth your concern. I've had worse things happen to me. My hotel is almost an hour away, and I don't want to miss a minute of what's going to happen here." So he threw up his hands. "Let's just consider it an eventuality, the usual course of life. May I?" He pointed with his hand to the stage from which the contest organizers had already announced something important. "I apologize, but I must leave you. I need to say a few words too." "Who's that?" "Don't you know?" Nancy casually asked thoughtfully as the man withdrew. It was very strange. but she suddenly felt something inexplicable. It wasn't like the silly romantic interest that had come over her when she'd met those other men, the ones she dreaded to think about now. "I don't know," Kate shrugged, "but he looks French. Your daughter was right to join the conversation. One of the guests of the evening is a lady in years in a black floor-length evening dress and a fur cape on her shoulders. His name is Antoine Defather. He is a legendary restaurant critic who has traveled the world to tell true foodies what is worthy of attention." The lady sighed admiringly. "It's a pity he's about to end his career now." "Really? Why?" Kate asked. "You see," the lady said eagerly, "Antoine started out as a chef and only then changed his trade. Now he intends to open a French restaurant. Yes, by the way, let you not be deceived by his name and excellent knowledge of this language, although he was born in Paris, but his mother was from the USA. And now he has decided to return to his roots. Came to us to travel and choose where to settle down. But he's a special guest of honor here, and it's even scary to imagine how much the organizers of all this paid for him to agree to take part in the jury and to give his opinion of the contestants. And if he speaks badly of Sam, I don't know what I'll do to him," Kate muttered. "Vanessa, we need to talk." Benjamin was beginning to feel like he was out in the desert chasing circulation. Because ever since they'd come here, his wife had been slipping away from him. And while he could understand her, who would enjoy catching their other half in such an ambiguous situation? But right now, he still couldn't understand why she just couldn't stop and let him explain himself, as he had already done when she had caught him in Nancy's illusorily compromising society. Finally, he caught up with her. Vanessa stopped at one of the Greek-style columns, which in this room served more as decorative elements than actual supports. Vanessa stood with her arms folded across her chest. "What do you want to talk about? Divorce? What? Honey, come on." Benjamin dropped his hands doomfully. He was ready to talk, but he counted on a calm, sober dialogue, not a monologue from his own side, in which all the words would be as if into the wall and bounce off the stubborn negative mood of the wife, her desire to close and her far-fetched resentment. "Tell me how long this has been going on." But there was nothing, Benjamin replied. He looked her straight in the eye, and would have given anything in the world, it seemed, just so she could read in his eyes the confirmation that he wasn't lying. The first time was Nancy. "We met as friends, talked. She asked, said she wanted to talk to you too, but later. Remember what kind of friends we were? There was no other company like us at school back then. You see, Nancy, she was just afraid you'd take it the wrong way." So Vanessa feared correctly and looked away defiantly, but immediately turned her face back to him. "Okay, that's taken care of. Are you just friends with this Elena too?" "No," Benjamin shook his head. "But I could swear on anything you say that I didn't give her any reason to behave that way. But you yourself know that the other waitresses, the staff in general, have been complaining a little about her. That she's been acting a little too loose with the guests, like she's flirting with some of the men. We didn't pay attention to it, of course, but I think I know what she wanted. The other waitresses used to say that Emily dreamed of finding a rich husband and any patron at all. Quick, Vanessa grinned bitterly, so she decided to go for it. What a girl her lips can be. A smile touched her lips for the first time since the quarrel. And it put hope in Benjamin's heart, so she started it first. And you were just confused, but you were getting ready to fight back. When I came in like that, yes, it was like that, Benjamin exhaled. Vanessa, I can't prove to you that I'm not lying. All I can do is to be as honest with you as I have always been with you. And then it's up to you. But I love you, and I don't want any other woman in the whole world. Even if Vanessa had a hard time drowning, I can't bear you a child, Emily, or some other young girl. They could. You be a father. You know, a long time ago, when I was a kid, Benjamin said, I used to dream that I was a bird, and when I woke up, I felt so disappointed. I thought it was so unfair, but then I realized that not having wings is just part of life, part of the world I exist in. It's the same with fatherhood. I won't hide it. I've wished for it, and I continue to wish for it, and probably will for the rest of my life. But that doesn't mean I can give up on you. You're my favorite woman. You're my other half, Benjamin practically whispered, and that's the most important thing to me. Nancy had already prepared many words of reconciliation, but now they all seemed shallow and inappropriate for some reason. And so, taking her husband's hand and meeting his gaze, she said just a few words. "I believe you and thank you for being with me." Sam hasn't felt so insecure since. What was there to say? He had never felt so insecure in his life. What was I gonna do? I had to go on stage. This was what all the contestants were supposed to do, where they briefly talked about the institutions they represented and the visas they had chosen for the competition. Teasers can't be called an extra-class establishment, Sam said of his place of business after announcing that he had made an apple pie. "We don't have any celebrities coming in, whose autograph you can hang on the wall, and we don't do branded dishes. Our menus are designed a season in advance. We do not have banquet halls, and to us, I admit, do not go on romantic dates or celebrate birthdays and other holidays. But we do appreciate each and every one of our customers. They are so different. There are a lot of regulars. For example, we have a factory worker who comes to us. He's a father of 3 kids. He always takes 2 meat dishes from us. Can you imagine? But he never takes sweets. He says he can't eat a bite. If one eats at all, he won't share it with the kids. Such an amazing person. And Grandma Zina also comes to visit us. She's very old with a stick, but she shows up at our house regularly. How does she get her pension? She always asks the waitress to calculate in advance how much it will cost to eat. She speaks very cordial. She reminds us how in my youth as a girl I used to visit the canteen at the factory. And we always give her a cup of tea as a gift from the institution, and a spoon or a sweet bun to it. We say it's for all regular customers, so she believes us. That's the kind of place we have. In general, I realize with my mind that I don't feel quite at ease here. Sam waved his hands, paused, and sympathetic laughter rang through the hall, but mostly without malice or snide remarks. And actually, I wouldn't risk participating. Yeah, well, my bosses sent me, so I'll give it a shot. And from here on out, let it be what it will be. And he left the stage. The exciting and most important moment came. Now the desserts were brought out one by one. Some, like Sam's apple pie, could be cut into slices, and others, if they were portioned, were made in several pieces at once. And now the desserts were on the tables. The audience froze. And the judges were concentrating on savoring the best delicacies from the city's top establishments. "Hi," Sam said. He, noticing Kate in the hall, approached her. "Hi," said the girl and introduced him to her mom. "Are you nervous?" asked Kate. "No," Sam sighed. "The main thing is not to win, but to participate. I'll gain experience and all that. And it's great. I'll brag about participating in such a contest." "Why are you talking like you're not going to win?" Pearl's got his hands up his sides. "Kate, you can do it. If what you wish for could come true." Sam grinned. "But thanks for the moral support." Finally, the objects of evaluation by the elite jury were eaten, and the secret voting began, after which the host took the stage. Today here were presented luxurious dishes, colorful and extraordinary, each of which, I'm not afraid to say it, could decorate the menu of any restaurant. But we, unfortunately, must choose only one, the best. And you know, when we just started voting, no one doubted, grinned the host. Who will win? A delicious chocolate fountain. It intertwines the classic traditions of this dessert and its original reading. An author's perspective. We all agreed that this would have been a fair choice on all counts. Well, that's what I thought. Sam lowered his gaze. "Yeah, I'm not upset," he said to the wall, already ready to comfort him in every way possible. "It's okay. That tough cook should win." But the next moment, when the presenter continued talking, Sam suddenly looked up at the stage in amazement. And the thing was that the host said that yes, the experienced jury members appreciated all the desserts, but there was one among them that impressed them especially, and it was a simple apple charlotte. I think many of us are familiar with this simple pie, which was prepared by our mothers, grandmothers, and aunts, said the host with a smile. It seems that every piece of it warmly resonates in the heart, and so we decided. We were going to judge the dessert fairly after all, which meant we had to take another vote. And so finally, the decision was almost made. The host paused for a spectacular pause and looked around at the breathless audience. Our guest of honor pondered the longest, our dear Antoine. But finally, he made his decision. And in the end, first place is awarded to apple pie. From Sam from Theezers. There was a round of applause and cheers. Sam rounded into a confused stare. Was this really happening to him? But go ahead. I gave him a gentle nudge in the back. Kate, did you deserve that? This is your victory. Let's go for it. Sam went on stage and accepted from the hands of the presenter the award of a gilded plate with a crystal actor, as well as a diploma and another check for a tidy sum as another prize. And now the guy truly realized that this was the happiest evening of his entire past, and so far, his life. And then he looked around the room and stopped at the picture. And suddenly he realized something important. And besides, we expect to cooperate, said the host and owner of the White Swan restaurant, smiling. And although it is not included in the rules of the contest, but I want to make you, Sam, special offers. How about selling this wonderful recipe? It could become the centerpiece of our establishment, a part of the list of dishes that make up, so to speak, its business card. That's a very generous offer, Sam replied. But I don't agree. First of all, I really hope this recipe shows up in Theezers. I think our guests will love it. And secondly, I'm thinking of recording a video of it and putting it online. Let people cook it. Let it be not only in the Café This Pie, but in every kitchen of those who want it. So you can write down the recipe. Shout it out from the audience. Some spectacular blonde in a red dress. How lovely, she continued. An attractive man who can cook. How can you resist? She joked and laughed. Finally, Sam was released from the stage. He received congratulations from all sides, including from the other contestants. And then he stayed a little longer at the celebration. It was necessary purely out of courtesy to talk to so many people. So Sam was not immediately able to approach the wall, and when he did, the girl met him with a frown. "Congratulations," she muttered. "You're a hot commodity, aren't you?" She added sharply, clearly implying that he had just been chatting with a lady owner of a pastry shop, who all coquettishly unobtrusive, and yet eloquently touched Sam, and clearly not jokingly asked for lessons in culinary skills, and also beckoned them to work. Yes, what a glory, Sam grinned. All right, squinted Kate. I'll go. Where to? The guy was surprised. Did I do something to offend you? No, it's all right, the girl answered so sharply that anyone would have realized that nothing was wrong with her. Wait a minute. Sam still wanted to say something important, but Kate ran away to the depths of the hall. And then, finding her mom there, told her that she wanted to go home because she had a headache. The next few days passed for Sam in a pleasant fog. He was still reliving the aftertaste of his victory, but there was something else that kept him busy, and he decided he had to act. "Hi," Kate said to him as she opened the door. It didn't surprise her that he knew her address. "I invited him to visit once, but Sam declined. What's up? Did something happen at work?" "No," he answered and handed her a bouquet of pink rose lollipops. "These are for you," cute Kate said, and she looked like she'd been given a mop instead of flowers. "Not for nothing. I hate flowers." "Liar," Sam grinned. "Roses are your favorite. You said so yourself. All right, come on in." The girl stepped aside, letting him through. "Since you're here, we need to talk." "Yeah, we've talked 100 times. Kate's going to get some water in a vase." "What do you want? You know what I mean?" "No. Look, if I don't want to, I love you." How did she not drop the vase too? Her hands were weak, as soon as she heard the cherished words, but instead she put the vase neatly on the table. Then she put the bouquet in it, and only then did she step toward the guy. She stood up and raised her head, meeting his gaze. "Say it again. I said I love you for real." "How else could you say it?" For a few minutes, they just stared at each other. Then Kate laughed happily and threw herself around his neck. "I also want you to marry me," Sam added. "You're quick." She smiled and kissed him for the first time herself. They would have said 1,000 more important words to each other. But at that moment, the doorbell rang. Kate, opening the door and seeing her mom, hurried to share her joy. "Mom, I'm getting married." Oh, that's all I could do. To begin with, Nancy said, walking into the house. Standing behind her were Kate's grandparents. And here was someone else she hadn't expected to be here at all. Antoine, Grandpa said sweetly. Just like that, out of the house for a little while. I don't know what's going on here. Who are you marrying? That's him. Kate grabbed her hand, looked out of the room, indignant. Sam, I told you about him. I'm very happy for you, daughter, Nancy said. That's just wonderful. Mom asked Kate, what's wrong? Are you different? Let me get this straight. Mademoiselle. Antoine stepped forward, and in the next few minutes it became clear that love at first sight had broken out between him and Nancy, and with such force that Antoine, having lived as a bachelor for the last almost 20 years, he suddenly decided not only to have an affair, but to marry Nancy. He gave her a diamond ring, and also to be serious and solid. Has already managed to get acquainted with her parents, and they approved such a candidate for a future son-in-law. Besides, Antoine decided that if he found a bride here, he would settle down in this town too. And here, as planned, we'll open a restaurant. That's great news for one day. That's right. Maybe my future son-in-law will even work in our family restaurant one day. What do you think? Sam was a little confused. He replied that he would think about it later. But for now, he was just happy. And he still had a lot to talk about with the cute picture. Benjamin, I don't think we can do this, Vanessa said. They'd just gone over the estimates they prepared, and the pile of paperwork needed to open a second Caesar's Cafe for the umpteenth time. I remember when we started, you said the same thing, grinned her husband. Don't worry, we'll make it work. All right, Vanessa sighed. I trust you. They were silent for a while, immersed in studying the documentation. Benjamin, we need to talk, and this can't wait. He rubbed his eyes tiredly with his fingers. It would be good to get it done today. We have to pick a place to rent tomorrow. Since when is work more important to you than your wife and family? Vanessa frowned. Benjamin blinks confusedly. Honey, are you offended? It's just that this is important to you and me. And no, of course, it's not more important to me. But just tell me what's going on. You haven't been the same lately. What's the same, but a little cranky? He grinned at Archie. Do you have a lot of mood swings? You used to be a whirlwind, but now you're tired all the time. I'm already worried. Are you sick? No, I'm healthy, Vanessa replied. But something is really going on with me, but I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I thought we trusted each other. You just told me yourself. So what's going on with you? Remember when you said that all change has its time, and sometimes something new can hurt? I remember, Benjamin nodded. That's what I said when you offered to buy a cottage. But you see, you and I don't have enough time for it, and it will be overgrown with weeds. Benjamin, I didn't mean the cottage. Vanessa started pacing nervously around the room. Then she stopped and either laughed or sobbed. I just don't know how to tell you to believe it. But I've been to several doctors already, and they confirmed it. Doctors? So you were sick after all? Benjamin jumped up, walked over to his wife, and wrapped his arms around her. We'll get through this. Trust me. Of course we will. Quietly poked Vanessa. In about 7 months. Why is Benjamin confused about 7 months? What are you talking about? How confused are you? Think about it. Vanessa lowered her eyes. It's just that I've been pregnant for 2 months. So that makes it 7 more to go. Pregnant. Benjamin could hardly believe his ears. But we were told. The doctor said that sometimes there are changes in a person's body. Well, it was a small possibility. But it did happen. Benjamin, aren't you glad? I forgive you for saying mean things about me. It's just that you're pregnant and therefore a little nervous. He hugged her even tighter and kissed her. No, I'm glad. I'm happy. This is the most wonderful thing that could have happened to us. Vanessa. So with cabbage. Personally, I am wary of letting it on the menu because even if we subject vegetables to heat treatment, a number of microorganisms. Sam kept saying something about the cafe's current problems. But Vanessa heard him, but didn't listen. All her attention was magnetically drawn to a text message from an unknown number. Your husband has a mistress? That's what it said. They also had the address where the immoral lovebirds were to meet, as well as the scheduled time for the outrage. Vanessa darted a glance at the wall, where a large clock hung above the certificate of honor for the Golden Mitten contest. On their backing was a picture of Paris and lots of scarlet roses, a gaudy thing. But they bought them on a wedding trip when they were in the most romantic city on earth. And ever since then, Vanessa considered them as if they were her talisman. It was this watch that was with them always while she and her husband realized their dream. And according to the position of the hands of the clock, the next betrayal was about to take place. Exactly 55 minutes later, there was a nasty lump in the throat. My heart beat frequently and rhythmically in my nose. Fell as if Vanessa was about to childishly roar desperately and resentfully at the world. But she shyly clasped her hand tightly, so the nails with the fresh cherry manicure spun into her palm. She took a deep breath and with a low whistle, exhaled through her teeth calmly. So what happened? Finally, she turned her gaze and attention to Sam. The chief cook froze, clapping his eyes. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. So the Brussels sprouts are all off-white and the corn is canned. The cans are deflated, so throw them away, nodded Vanessa, rising from behind the table of the head of the catering and grabbed the handbag standing on it. And what about the menu? I can't buy new products at 6 o'clock somewhere. What am I supposed to do? You're a smart guy, Sam. Vanessa took her coat off the rack, grabbed her scarf, grabbed her gloves. We'll be changing suppliers. That's a definite. Think of something. Change the menu for now. For the next few days, okay, at your discretion. She walked right past him. Out of the office came the young tomato chef. Mick followed her. All tomorrow, close today on your own. Okay, but you'll manage. It's not the first time. Get dressed by the greenhouse. It's early September. Walk to the parking lot belonging to the cafe and get in the car. Start the engine. Vanessa coolly drove forward to where she needed to go. But at the same time, she was hysterical and refused to believe that such a thing was possible. Or believe that cheating was possible. It was long overdue. And she was just blind, a fool, confident in the unshakable style of her feminine happiness. They'd known each other since high school. Vanessa had been in it since she was a freshman. Benjamin transferred after his parents traded in the apartment. There was some family intrigue over living space with relatives moving to another part of town. He was a donkey above everyone in the class, but he could not claim the status of a threat and a menace because he was still very thin. For which, by the way, the witty ones nicknamed him Skeleton. Are you a goth? Vanessa asked him once. She just had to make conversation with the new kid at recess. So she said the first thing that popped into her head. It's just that you're always in black and your hair is long. No, Benjamin replied. Just black hair. It's my grandmother's. She says it's how a person keeps the earth's energy. I see, said Vanessa, who actually had more questions about the novelties. By the will of the teacher, they found themselves at the same desk, and this also contributed to their bonding. Soon the classmates realized that Benjamin, despite its necessity, nothing. So the guy studied well, but did not give up and could even give a write-off. He did not mess with bullies, but no one touched him. Why? Benjamin just had, as the boys joked, a super ability to resolve any conflict with just one look. And they respected him when it became known that he had been working part-time since he was 14. So he has his own pocket money, mercifully given by his parents for good behavior. And slowly, by the last year of school, a small company of Vanessa, Benjamin, and Tony had formed. That redhead and glasses, you and Tony. Tony was a typical excellent student and literally a nerd because he was eager to study all the flora of the planet. He went abroad on some kind of grant after graduation. And for 6 years, he wrote long letters to his friends full of Latin names of fauna. He was studying, I think, shrubs in Mongolia or Brazil. But then it just kind of went to zero. He was a good kid, Tony. All we had to do now was reminisce about a former friend. And then there was Nancy, a good girl, and there seemed to be nothing more to say about her because she was, well, such a good girl, she studied roughly. But the teachers sometimes grumbled, saying, well, somebody's in charge of the scholastics, and she doesn't take anything from her own head. She was always neatly combed, clean, dressed Monday, sundresses, water, caress on Tuesday abdominal suit. Wednesday, sundress and caress again. Thursday, skirt and blouse. Friday, dresses with old-fashioned all-yellow fifth lace collars. Yes, Nancy dressed for school clearly on schedule and never took compote or scones or anything sweet at all to the canteen. Sugar, the white death, she explained. One day, her resistance to the treat. I don't want to die. Young, I have a long and decent life ahead of me. Nancy never let anyone cheat and didn't talk much about herself. I mean, she did. But it sounded strange for a teenage girl, and even creepy. A decent person doesn't like pop music. He listens to classical music, respects opera. You have to live your life so you won't be ashamed in front of your great-grandfather. No, artists draw, children just dabble, and felt tip pens are poisonous nonsense. They'll give birth to sick children. You should marry in such a way that you won't be ashamed in front of your grandmothers. That's the sort of thing Nancy used to say. When, for example, she was asked about her hobbies or why she was so glum in art class. Nancy once told Benjamin, who by senior year not only got a haircut, but started wearing jeans and t-shirts. Basically, he looked like a regular kid. You're not twice if you're in a cult. Is there something going on at home? Benjamin was being humorous, but the subtext was serious. He just had a personal adolescent confrontation with his grandmother, who was a generally nice woman, but with some weirdness. Granny had moved to her daughter in the city from the countryside, abandoning the household and the familiar world. To help raise her grandson, helped, pampered, took care of the pension, did not spare to help the young family, but was a little bit with oddities. But Benjamin still loved her very much. Graduation, by the way, remained in Vanessa's memory for many years as the most beautiful events in the world. To be more precise, its first half, because the second half became a nightmare. But that day began wonderfully. In the morning, a hairdresser came to their home, who built on the head of a young girl hairstyle worthy of Pompadour, as said the master of beauty herself. It was curls, and the curls were crunchy. And from how much they were drenched with lacquer, and it was all covered with roses and pearls. There was makeup too, and not a timid drop of lipstick and mascara, but the grown-up version with cream powder blush, and even black pencil. Mom, though, cautiously asked, isn't that a little much? For a 17-year-old girl from a high school gala. But the hairdresser, Aunt Jenna, stuck her tongue out, looked angry and shook a magazine that said, in big letters, Fashion from Hollywood itself. You want your daughter to be the prettiest, don't you? Aunt Jenna asked. I want her to be my happiest, Vanessa's mom sighed. But since she likes it so much herself, Vanessa's dress was a looker. Flex colors of natural silk with added synthetics with a heart cut out, and even the sandals were gold. Daddy had set aside a generous amount from his paycheck for one thing for his daughter. In general, at the prom she felt like a real princess, catching admiring glances. But what really mattered to her was the attention of only one man, Benjamin. And when the solemn school part was over and the graduates went up to the ship, the main and all terribly expected part of the holiday was expected on the water. Then Benjamin suddenly drew Vanessa to a secluded corner where he stood close, took her hands and, looking into her eyes, said, in 3 months we will be 18 years old. Let's get married. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. It was that moment when Vanessa realized with delight that it was all over. Childhood was behind her, and here it was grown up, happy, incredible life opened its arms to her. She laughed, smiled at him, and told him she agreed. So they stood near the engine room in a secluded corner and gazed dreamily at each other. Nancy suddenly turned to Vanessa and saw her friend peering out of the corner. She was deathly pale and her face was twisted. Vanessa realized what was going on. Nancy repeated and rushed after the alumna, who ran to the upper deck. On the way, Nancy fell briskly to her knees, but didn't even seem to notice it. She caught up with her on the upper deck, where the tack and sway of the couple's dance was sounding. Nancy, listen, Vanessa said. We didn't mean to hurt you. And I love him, don't I? She whispered back. Vanessa swallowed the words she still wanted to say. She had guessed that for a long time, hadn't she? It was hard not to decipher the glances Nancy was throwing at Benjamin. It was hard to ignore how already a bit wordy he was. The strange girl was starting to completely stutter and muddle her words when he appeared next to her. Except Vanessa seemed like it wasn't all serious. What kind of love? Nancy had it all she knew exactly. There was no relationship. Yeah, she didn't even hold hands with boys, much less ever have anything. There was no romance with Benjamin. And now Vanessa thought they were all getting along. They'd talk like friends. She would explain how things with Benjamin were real. And Nancy would understand, even be happy for her. How could she not? And she'll be her maid of honor at the wedding. And Nancy will find happiness. Not with Benjamin. A senior called out to them. Don't get too close to the boards. Those fences are a little flimsy. It's not a ship at all, but a trough. He muttered and went to the table with appetizers. But neither Nancy nor Vanessa paid any attention to his words. The sun shone at 6 o'clock, hidden first behind a wood pearl of gray clouds, and then hid behind a truly freight cloud. The wind came in rough gusts. The surface of the river merged in waves. I loved him, I always have, exclaimed Nancy and clasped her hands. Listen, Vanessa. It was unpleasant that their scandal might be at the center of the general celebration. She moved closer to Nancy, wanted to take her somewhere where she could talk without strangers. You've got it all wrong. Benjamin and I are serious. Nancy, let's have a quiet, calm conversation. Nancy, okay. Who would ever think that you and Benjamin could have anything? Because I'm not as pretty and smart and straight a student as you. The girl snapped, her face creased ugly. She ran her hand over her face, smearing her lipstick. Yes, this day Nancy changed her habits and painted her lips a piercing scarlet color. I hate you, shouted out, and she stepping back, clutching her back to the side of the ship. Traitor, I thought we were friends. The other students were starting to look back at them already. Nancy stopped the hysterics, snapped back at Vanessa. You and Benjamin have never even been on a date. What makes you think he has? Vanessa didn't have time to finish, because suddenly there was a prolonged scraping of metal. Everything happened so fast that no one had time to do anything. All that was left was to watch in horror. Here Nancy staggered leaning backward again. Ridiculously, she waved her arms. And the next instant, the segments of the fence, the deck of the ship simply broke off and flew down into the dark waves of the river, on which the early summer storm was already playing fiercely, and Nancy flew after it with a desperate shriek. Naturally, there was a commotion. Someone threw a life preserver overboard. The captain came running. People were screaming and pointing their fingers in the water. It was a terrible accident. And coincidentally, it didn't end well. And yet it didn't end as nightmarishly as it could have. The thing was that the ship was just passing by a shoal, on which the volume of the shoal was a few Nancy downstream, exactly in my typical doll literally nailed her shoal. But it so happened that the girl was just dragged through a sunken tree, and there was still some junk iron, sharp rocks. Anyway, Nancy survived, but by the time she was rescued, she was badly injured. Word got out to last night's graduates. Slipped into a coma, and the ugliness on her face and body. Fractures open, scars that would last a lifetime. Vanessa was in shock. She felt so guilty. After all, if it hadn't been for their fight, Nancy would certainly have been more careful and not fallen overboard, but she hadn't had the chance to say anything to her friend. To apologize to her because Nancy's parents, as soon as their daughter's condition allowed it, had taken her away and moved to another town. Why? Well, I guess that's what they decided for some reason. Yeah, it was all just awful. Vanessa did not have a chance to swim long in the consequences of what had happened, because life went on after all. Vanessa, it was time to take care of her future. And it wasn't easy. The thing was that her family wanted her daughter to become a lawyer. Vanessa had nothing against law, but her soul lay to something else. She wanted to be a chef. It so happened that since childhood she loved to cook, her mother and grandmother and great-grandmother. And in general, the whole female part of the family admired and praised. After all, rarely a girl of 12 years can cook a full lunch or dinner for the whole family, and even herself tears constantly let, say, to the stove. But then, in general, admiration diminished when they realized that Vanessa decided to connect her fate with it. How so? How so, dear Serious Practice? Prospects may even have their own law practice, but Vanessa was lucky with her folks. They grumbled, lamented the unfulfilled great hopes, but supported in the gastronomic dream. And Nancy enrolled as a chef, not in a technical school, but in a university. Her family paid for her studies and supported her in every possible way. Relations with Benjamin meanwhile developed smoothly, harmoniously, exactly according to the romantic scenario prescribed in advance. They met afterwards after the university, moved in together, so to speak, to live together. But it was clear to everyone that it was going to be a wedding. And the wedding was played, as it should be, with a white dress, doves, cake, shouts of bitterness, and a wedding trip to Paris for a week. Benjamin, by the way, decided to become a lawyer, and this partly consoled the family of his wife, who decided that okay, although take and manage to realize partly collective ambitions and dreams. Vanessa more than once said friends and colleagues that she is simply happy. Life goes on quietly, prosperously. There is income. The mortgage was taken and paid off ahead of schedule, but it seemed to Vanessa that she would give up everything in the world if her life came to her. The main thing that was missing to make her really happy, and the thing was that she could not get pregnant. Doctors' examinations, expensive clinics, and even attempts to eco. And then trips to remote villages to heal her Baucus, it was all useless. It was almost physical. It was painful to see off moms with strollers with an envious look in the street. How many times Vanessa had a dream. She is Perky in the arms of babies on 6 blankets, and he is her greatest treasure in the whole world. And then the merciless awakening hit, and she was flooding her pillow with tears. Benjamin, too, was crushed, without the density of their marriage. And what's most frustrating is that the doctors said it was as if both couples were healthy, but it wasn't working. You see, human biology, his nature is a unique thing, divorced one old man, a professor, to whom they went to counseling. Modern science believes that sometimes strong and full man and woman are not able to have children because of, so to speak, individual genetic incompatibility. And so when everything was tested, when everything became clear, Benjamin and Vanessa found themselves faced with a choice. What to do next? After all, it was clear that theoretically, if each of them tried to build another family, there would probably and almost certainly be children there. Maybe we should just get a divorce. Vanessa once asked on the day this shower conversation took place. They were celebrating their 9th wedding anniversary. We could stay friends. She turned to her husband and shared any other words. That's how he looked at her. Don't ever talk about divorce again, he said. You love me and I love you. Since there are no children, it's fate. But we are married and only death will separate us. Remember, and they never talked about divorce again. And what of relatives and friends, even the closest ones, except mom and dad and those people who could be trusted? Anyway, they were the only ones who knew the whole truth. The rest of us thought it was just each spouse being infertile. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Benjamin, when all the guests had left, gave his wife another gift. What's this? She asked. When she opened the gift paper rustling in the night, she found a puffy folder with some documents. Something you've been dreaming of for so long, smiled her husband. I thought it was time for us to take a decisive step and change everything in our lives. Vanessa, raising an eyebrow in surprise, opened the folder and aghast almost dropped it. Because there were estimates and all other documentation related to the opening of their own cafe. Yes, a long time ago, back on their wedding trip, they had talked about it, but jokingly. So one day they said they'd open their own place. I've inquired, Benjamin added. We've been pre-approved for a loan to open a business. I've already looked at the premises. My favorite, I found out everything. He concluded shocked. We'll pull the wife into our arms, we can handle it. What do you say? Vanessa then cried long and loud. She was crying, she was barely able to cry, she was hiccuping with tears. But they were tears of joy. She'd been dreaming for so long. Yes, she kept putting it off. And her husband, her favorite man, took it and did it. Took all the decisive steps, and now it remained only to agree to risk everything with him for the sake of their common dream. relatives and friends perceived the business project of the spouses ambiguously. Some praised, saying, "Keep it up. Go ahead. You'll become millionaires." Some of them twisted their fingers at the temple. After all, they decided to take a loan against the security of the apartment. And it was also required, by the way, to leave a stable job and go into open water. When it is known how many novice businessmen are soon disappointed in their ideas and remain, as they say, without pants. But Benjamin and Vanessa did not listen to anyone. They were stubbornly determined and boldly acted. They decided that they would not open either a flashy restaurant or a refined coffee shop, where people come for authors' drinks. They decided that they wanted to open an institution with homemade, tasty, simple, and inexpensive cuisine, which, however, would not be a banal canteen, but an institution with its own zest. And how many difficulties came to light when you went from plans to reality? Sleepless nights risking losing your business and your apartment. Trying to guess which dishes people would like. One time they even had strange wigs and leather jackets stop by. Honestly, it was like a time machine from the 90s. There was something more about the roof. But Benjamin threatened them. That he's a lawyer, he's got big connections, and he's going to show them how to play the mafia. And those weird-looking checks never showed up again. And then, after a few years that seemed to fly by like a day, the couple realized they'd made it. They have their own cafe canteen, which has firmly established itself in the city's catering market and has its own clientele. Benjamin and Vanessa, although there was at some point such an opportunity, decided not to expand. Of course, opening new cafes of their own chain would have increased their income, but it would have forced them to attract outsiders to the top of the business. This would not have allowed to keep such a close eye on everything, to participate in all spheres of life of their brainchild. So they left it the way it was, and everything was fine. The family business was doing well. It would seem that what else is needed? But Vanessa had already accepted the fact that they wouldn't have children. All right, let it be. So it was indeed fate. But lately, in the last year, she suddenly began to notice how they were drifting apart. No, there were no fights, no scandals. But a coldness had crept into their marriage imperceptibly, just as a night frost can suddenly engulf a garden. Although the day before had been the most similar, but Vanessa had shrugged it off for the time being. Come to think of it, less socializing, not kissing in the morning, and not talking as often as before. I love you. After all, they're not young people anymore. They've been married for years. It's only natural. And then the stresses of business, when you barely have time to eat and take sleeping pills to sleep a wink. It's also a reason not to drown in the body, a sneeze of tenderness. With the other half, it was only that stupid contest, for which Benjamin obviously did not apply from a great mind, and Vanessa still did not find time to take it off. Anyway, it just seemed like married life was going on. They lived like normal people, nothing nightmarish, nothing to get hysterical about. But now, as Vanessa drove the car through the evening streets, she realized no, there were alarm bells. Yes, she was stupid and naive and had ignored them. Like the fact that her husband had been on the phone with someone a couple times and then abruptly ended the conversation when she walked into the room. Your husband has a mistress. The text of the text message seemed to be imprinted in fiery letters in her brain, and Vanessa, letting out a low groan, slammed her fists on the king in frustration. Av almost lost her grip on the steering wheel with both hands and bit her lip. She couldn't yet figure out what she was going to do when she didn't. Not the time for that right now, she just needed to figure it out, to make sure it was true. And so here she was, Velvet Restaurant. The text said they'd chosen the summer veranda, that it was their usual spot. Good evening. Grew up in front of Vanessa, a smiling girl, a waitress, but she only waved her off and walked resolutely forward. Many establishments still kept summer verandas. This one offered guests cozy plaid plaids and used tiny lamps imitating antique lanterns as lighting on the tables. Vanessa noted with a professional eye the well-chosen palette of the interior and the unobtrusive music playing in the background. She walked forward without feeling her feet. There was the familiar back of her head in front of her sitting in a chair, and a woman sitting next to her. She spotted her before Benjamin did and turned around. Vanessa stopped abruptly, as if she had hit an invisible barrier. Her eyes darkened. She exhaled 3 breaths, recognizing her rival. "Oh, Sam, I thought you were stuck in there until morning." Kate winked at the guy and boldly but innocently took him under her arm in a friendly manner. "Just had to check things out well."